Hello, this is the Hovering Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out to me. And the best way to do that is through email and YouTube. And as I mentioned, well, now I think it's already over with the Paramount Plus, but you can still hear me auditorily. And you can hear this through different audio platforms, with Speaker, Spotify, so as a Sirius XM, you name it. Pretty much, you can hear me. And you can also hear my voice talking about the Hovering Light. Alright, so I'm on a lot of different platforms, so it won't be hard to find me. So, on to the topic of choice. So since Easter is on Sunday, I'm going to give my thoughts about the aspects of Passover and then Easter and how that's implemented in American culture and all sorts of commentary about it here. Here we go. Alright, so I want to start with my thoughts about Passover and Easter. Alright, so it's quite interesting. Passover is traditionally is towards the Jewish faith here. And so, when we get into the aspects of talking about the story of Moses and how the Israelites were taken, you hear noise in the background. That's my youngest child here. Hold on, baby. Oh, sorry, folks. Let's see, that should be good, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. So, and Moses and the Israelites and all of the trials and tribulations and everything that he restored and helped them bring their faith, right? And it's broken down, and it's divided up. And the other half, when we get into the story of Jesus and everything, is the Christian take about faith in Christianity. And so, interesting how those two worlds of the Torah in the traditional way and the faith of the Jewish, and versus Jesus and the Christian faith commingle with one another and are sect out into our society. And so those things really were very prevalent more and more and more early on in American culture, specifically when we get into the aspects of how life was going on for people when we get in the midst of World War II, around the 40s and 30s and all the way into the 50s and so forth. And so I mentioned this more on Sunday, and to plug it too here. So on Sundays, what I do is, for supporters, I give some extra, more in-depth commentary and more in-depth thoughts. And as for your subscribers, you're interested, I have always provide the link for you to be a subscriber. And so what I said was, I was talking briefly about the aspects of the movie The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. And so I'm going to go into more specifics about that on my main channel here. And this is going to lead into everything to the commentary on all the information I found about Passover, Easter. I think that the movie really bridged the gap. That movie really bridged the gap with the aspects of how culturally the American society at large was merging at that time. So the movie, right, in itself is depicting the life and times of Moses. And so at the time, period pieces were just all the rage, you know. And so it shaped a lot of things forward in the method and the aspects of how Hollywood wanted to take their disposition about faith and religion here. And it's quite interesting how, you know, things are circling back into made for television movies, I guess. Well, you know, that trying to reiterate the aspects of faith and tradition in culture. With Fox, if I'm not mistaken, on this Sunday, having an epic event or epic movie event. I told you to stop, didn't I? A movie event, and to the same color of the Moses story, but I think this time they're going to focus in on Noah or something. I'm not quite sure. Anyhow, going back to the point here. So, you know, when we get into the 70s and so, it's more of, you know, they're getting over the hump of the 60s of free love and everything. And then focusing attention towards, you know, Joseph and the multicolored coat and then also the aspects of Jesus Christ Superstar. And trying to put, you know, a liberal bent, so to speak, in the aspects of Jesus and his disposition about his faith and Christianity and how that melds itself into pop culture and modern culture. All right, so going towards Passover and Easter, these things are something that are segmented in how, you know, culture and values lie within a society. So, you know, with that said, I am going to take y'all all on a journey with facts and understandings about the two. Here we go. So first, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start out with talking about here the origin and history in modern times of Passover and Easter. Okay? And as I mentioned all the time, and I'll reiterate this because sources are very important into finding out facts and to sharing the facts with y'all and for y'all to understand where I'm getting my information from. So sources will be provided for you, and you can see those links and when I upload in the information. No, just get in the back. No. Hold on, baby. Here. Okay. No, stop. All right. So it says. Hold on. This isn't quite. Hold on. This isn't quite what I need. Oh, let me see. Let me start with. This is more polished than that one. This is more polished. Sorry about that, folks. All right, so I'm going to start out by talking about Passover, and this is entitled My Jewish Learning. This is by My Jewish Learning, and it's both celebration of spring and hope through there are major differences, and it's by Rabbi Ishmar. Forgive me for the pronunciation. I'll do my best here. Skiroski. All right, so it starts out by saying the frequent overlapping of Easter and Passover of the Christian holiday week, an 8-day celebration of Passover merits attention. Unlike the yoking of Christmas and Hanukkah, Easter and Passover are festivals of equal gravity. If you don't sit down right now. side by side the bringing of light and the deep structures of both religions. Now, first, their matrix is all about spring. So, in each case, the calendar is adjusted to ensure that the holiday is celebrated early in the spring. So, for the church, which believes that the resurrection took place on a Sunday, the first council of Nicea in 325 determined that Easter should always fall on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the vernal equinox. So, in a consequence, Easter remained with the... No, not right now.
Mama.
Don't start.
It's gonna be yellow pinkish.
No, not in here.
But when? In the kitchen?
Yeah, wait till your nanny gets back, okay? Their nana, their grandma. Okay, so let's get back here. The Easter, that Easter should always fall on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the vernal equinox. So, which is considered the start of Passover on the 15th of the Hebrew month, Nisan. So by the same token, the rabbi understands the verse, you go free on this day and the month of it, which is Exodus 13:4. To restrict Passover to early spring, that is it's a transitional month when the winter rains in and the winter turns mild. Shh. I see, baby. Good job. So the word avi actually means fresh ears of barley. So, since the Torah had stipulated that the month in which the Exodus from Egypt occurred should mark the start of a new year, which is specifically Exodus 12:2, the end of the prior year was subjected to periodic extension in order to keep the Jewish lunar calendar in sync with the solar year. Thus, if the barley in the fields or the fruit on the tree had not ripened significantly for bringing the omer, the first barley sheaf, which was dominated to the temple, or the first fruits of the temple, the arrival of Passover, it would be delayed by declaring a leap year and doubling the final month. Now, it's quite interesting how the aspects of the natural world is very interwoven in the spiritual traditions and rituals, right? And so that's really apropos into the aspects of how, really at its core, that's what we're getting at when we get to the midst of religion. How do we place ourselves in our natural world? And then our rituals, are bound by that of our spiritual understandings here. So both festival emphasizes history and hope.
Katie bought a walk home.
It's okay. So
Can I throw it outside?
no. Can you stop?
Mommy, but only on the grass.
Hey, look, I'm recording. Can you hush?
Only on the grass.
No, not right now. I said no. So, second in both festivals, nature and history, the coverings with a resounding message of hope. So the renewal of nature that comes with spring amplifies the promise of redemption, and then it's embedded in the historical events being commenced. To each faith, community, God, presence, and its presence is manifested into itself in two keys. So in nature and throughout history. Yet in both, their preferred medium is history, a legacy of the biblical shift to monotheism. So Judaism and Christianity rest firmly on the foundation of the stories recounting ritually in their respectful spring festivals. So in Egypt, the family of Jacob had morphed into a nation. Stop.
Mama, I want to walk.
You don't do that. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay, let's go back. Let's backtrack here. So with Jacob had morphed into a nation well together by the bitter experience of oppression. So redemption by God was with them the national mission to create a body politic of a nobler order. So though their descendants failed, no, you gotta wait. Though their descendants failed, the body of religious literature, which recorded their efforts and their voice. Hold on, baby. Just a minute. Voice their ideals would challenge humanity even as it would comfort them in their long exile. So to recall the Exodus in dark times, which nurtured the yearning. Yeah, you just ate something. Hold on.
No, I want to drink.
Just a minute, okay? So the yearning for the future resurrection, which is why Passover ends with the reciting of the prophetic reading that bristles with this worldly Masonic message, which is in Isaiah, which starts at chapter 10 from verse 32 and onward to chapter 12, verse 6. So if Passover is largely about Egypt, Easter is largely about Passover. Bless you, baby. Its historical setting is Jerusalem at Passover. Stay right here. The Last Supper could well have been an embodied Seder, and Jesus is the fated to become the lamb, the fat sacrificial lamb here. So indeed, the New Catholic Church calls Easter the Christian Passover. So the good news is that the death of one has the capacity to save many. So the resurrection of Jesus is the ultimate affirmation of life, or in the words of the Byzantine clergy, Christ is risen from the dead. Dying, he conquered death. So to the death, he is given life. Finally, because the message of both festivals is so central to the belief system of each faith and community, it is interlaced in the clergy year-round. So in the Haggadah, we read that Rabbi Esler ben Asera was already advanced in the years before he went through the Exodus from Egypt and should be recalled by every Jewish person twice daily. So in the evening as well as in the morning, that is the reason for the addition at the third paragraph of the Shema, a prayer said twice daily, in which this is the bedrock fact in the affirmations. So God's compassion and our obligation to us is to sacrifice our lives. So correspondingly, for Catholics and many Protestants, the weekly sacrament of the communion is a reaction to the Last Supper, which in turn is God's saving grace into a lived reality. All right, so Passover is communal, while Easter is individual. So still for all of the communities, Passover and Easter is diverse fundamentally. While both festivals are... Sit down, baby.
I'll say hello.
Sit down.
I want to say hello.
While both festivals are both delivered from a state of despair, but it is slavery or sin, Passover heralds the birth of the Jewish people as a force for good in the community, in the communes of nations. In contrast, Easter assures the individual Christian life of eternal life. So Passover sermons Jewish people collectively into the world to repair it. That's what the Jewish faith is for. So Easter is a way out of a world beyond repair. So, and it's quite interesting because there is, from what I understand, with the Jewish faith, like that, and then help me out, people who listen to me, if you are Jewish or you have friends that are Jewish, and sit down. So from my understanding, that for the Jewish faith, with as far as the afterlife and everything, that is like the real form of reality is on earth and what we do on earth, and that's not really accessible to Christian faith with, everything that is accounted for in the afterlife, and there's that, which hence we get into the heaven and hell aspects of faith and religion with Christianity. All right, so with that said, let me go on here. All right, so Passover reflects a worldview that devalues life after death and privilege the community over the individual. Easter bespeaks a religion that reverses both sets of priorities, enabling it to comfort those who had lost faith in the gods of Rome. All right, so close it, baby. Won't you go? Close the door for me. No. Won't you go inside? No, you're not behaving out here.
I'm going to behave.
You haven't done it yet. Okay, folks, I'll be right back. All right, so Piper's getting really out there. Why? Because you're being booties. You're being booties. Well, she's being a lot right now, but it's okay. That's how life of a parent. Anyway, so let's get back to everything here. So Passover's connection to Rosh Hashanah. It is well known that Passover is not the only Jewish New Year. In fact, it came to share that the role of the Rosh Hashanah, whereas the months are numbered from Nisan, when Passover falls, and the years are counted from Nishtiri, and the month in which Rosh Hashanah falls. So the reason for that is the development of the Rosh Hashanah after the canonization of the Hebrew Bible. So perhaps the collection is the immersion of Christianity into a festival that addresses itself solely to the faith of the individual. So the Messianic stresses that on Rosh Hashanah alone, God has all inhabitants of the world and passes before him like flocks of sheep. So this is entitled specifically in Rosh Hashanah, the first chapter, second verse. So on the other three pilgrimage, that's okay, baby.
That's you.
Okay. The festivals include Passover, and the world is judged by God collectively. So the expansion of the nameless first day of the seventh month, which is loud in a blast were the sounds. So this is, you can see this account in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 24, and again in Numbers in chapter 29, verse 1. So into a solemn day of judgment of every single member of humanity suggests a Jewish response to a society with a heightened sense for the importance of the individual. So the result, however, is not a transformation of Judaism. Its depth structure remains intact. So Rosh Hashanah joins Passover, and it does not replace it. All right, so while the valence of the individual is definitely elevated, the priority of the group is not devalued. So Judaism continues to be animated by a script of being in the community. Likewise, the dominant orient stays this worldly. So Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are not about getting into heaven. So stop.
What are we doing?
Do it again. So, likewise, the dominant orientation says that this is worldly. So, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are not about getting into heaven, in fact. So, the profusion of prayers carry aloft a modest request of God to give with the Jewish faith of people but one more year to try again, to live your life in such a manner as to make a difference. So the important task is to mend the world, not to flee from it. So the retention of the 2 new years, one in the spring and one in the fall. I see. And with this, it bespeaks the remarkable effort to keep the polarities of everything in balance. And that is really, really, really so poetically poignant. And before I transition to the last points here, last facts here. So why is this so poetically poignant? Because there's an ever-changing... let me rephrase this. So life in itself, especially now, and this is something that's never going to end, because it's something that, with humanity is always going to be this internal struggle for some kind of, suffering, some kind of struggle here. Hush, mama. And so you stop. And so with that, to have the Jewish faith in being bound to believe that, it's a communal effort, we're all in our faith together to understand the sex of seasons and how in this season and in the spring, fall season, how we must bind ourselves into understanding that this is eternally something that we just make a commit to preserve and protect, and to understanding our faith as our pilgrim. It is a pilgrimage. I don't know why I'm getting tongue-tied here. And as a multitude to that, as our service, while we're living here on earth. Whereas with the Christian faith, which I believe is, individually how you're supposed, individually how, you give, it depends on, and that's quite interesting with the aspects of just with Christianity, because Christianity isn't the same all around. So even though it's really the best way to say this is really, yes, the faith is the same, but how it's thought about and perceived is quite different. So a Calvinist is different from, let me say a Methodist is different from a Baptist, is different from Protestant, Calvinism, all these, right? And so, or, an unorthodox or orthodox and so forth. And so, essentially, the mission is that, yes, individually, how we perceive the cross and the teachings of Jesus and all the suffering and all of this thing, and the hope of the underlying reality, for the most part, is that the afterlife, where everything is placed, is the ticket. When in actuality, it's one of those things that should also be understood, which I also had this belief early on in my journey with faith. I just believe that, and I saw that, and I just internalized that a lot very early, as a kid, that, yeah, and now, of course, that if you're lying, or, nah, I don't want to be that brazen, but I'm just being very honest. If, people who say, oh, no, I never had, some, you hear some stuff about, oh,
Mama, can I get something to drink?
hold on, with the aspects of not being tested, or, struggling and trying to figure out everything with faith. I mean, come on, that goes without saying.
Can I get some chocolate milk?
Yeah, hold on just a minute. You want to get it?
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, that goes without saying, because, it's one of those things where, yes, you experience that, but it either takes you on to be more devout, or to go away, or to find a middle ground, or so forth, when it comes to your religious journey, or, and so forth. And so anyway, my point in saying all these things is that, it doesn't stop with the individual. It doesn't stop at the church house. All of these, what we're being instilled in our faith, in our Christian faith, it should be implemented in our community. We should be bound together and uplift the community by our faith. And that one, and I mean, that's easier said than done, but that's something that should be, yes, ma'am, that can really help restore a lot of broken communities in a very vital way. So with this said, I'm going to go on and wrap up everything. I'm going to give this here by saying, be careful, okay? Let me help you out. Okay, that's enough, Mama. That's enough. All right, so put the top on, okay? All right, so I am going to...
Bye.
No, I'm not done yet.
Oh.
So I am going to... Let's see. Go into talk about this from an American point of view. So this is entitled, this was originally written quite recently on March 22nd, 2026. So it's entitled The American Pagan. Alright, so it says, while many believe Easter is a stolen pagan festival, historically and linguistically, evidence suggests its origin are primarily linked to Jewish Passover in the medieval Christian traditions. So the name Easter is likely derived from the Old High German I'm sorry for this, historium, or historiam, which means dawn east, rather than the goddess Istori, who is only mentioned by 1/8th century monk, which is the name the monk is Bed. So the key symbol, like the Easter bunny and the decorated eggs, merged from the 17th century German folklore and the Lent fasting practices, respectively, rather than the ancient fertility rites. So, for accurate historical analysis, scholars reference the Britannicahistory.com and the Royal Museum of the Greenwich. So, why accuracy matters? Debunking the pagan Easter myths from the modern practitioner. So, if you spend many time online, in online pagan circles, you've seen the infographics. You've seen the infographics, according to this source, that claims that Easter is just a misspelling of Easter. That the bunny is an ancient idol of a long lost goddess, and that the church stole the spring equinox. As a seasoned practitioner, this person is a seasoned practitioner, and let me recite that. This is not me speaking. This is the source speaking that I'm getting from. This person gets the impulse. So when you first find your path, there is a drive to reclaim everything, to see the old ways hidden under every modern tradition. But there is hard truths. Bad history does not make our ways stronger. So when it's claimed our tradition that aren't ours, or invert ancient histories that did not happen, we actually erase the unique beauty of your own authentic pagan ancestors. So, the name Easter versus Easter. So, the most common gotcha is that Easter is named after the German goddess Easter. So, in reality, the only person in history to mention her was a monk named Bed in 725 AD. There is zero archaeological evidence to altars, no inscriptions, no offerings for her cult. So linguistically, Easter is far more likely to stem from the Old High German Historium, which refers to the dawn or the east. In almost every other language, the holiday is called Paschal, which is rooted in the Hebrew Pascha, which is Passover. So the lesson, our ancestors were focused on the direction of the rising sun. So we do not need a goddess of the month to make the return of the light sacred. The Easter bunny, a late bloomer. So it is loved. The hair is very loved and a symbol of the wild. But the Easter bunny isn't an ancient fertility idol. It first appeared in the 17th century German folklore as the Easter hare. This hare wasn't a god, he was a judge, similar to Santa Claus, who decided if children had been well behaved. So the lesson in the 17th century folklore is still folk magic. Just get it, baby, in its own right. But linking it to ancient Mesopotamia or Saxon fertility rites is historically inaccurate. So, I got two more to talk about and then it'll wrap up. So, the eggs. Practicality over paganism. So, the idea that eggs were stolen from pagan spring rituals is a popular trope. However, the tradition of Easter eggs became a staple of the holiday because of Lenten fasting. So for 40 days, medieval Christians were forbidden from eating eggs. So the chickens, however, did not stop laying. So to keep the eggs from spoiling, people had hard-boiled them. So by Easter Sunday, there was a massive surplus. The lesson: this is a beautiful example of how mundane life and food preservation creates tradition. The date, the moon, and the law. So the most common myth is that the church hijacked the spring equinox. Actually, the date of the Easter is calculated through the complex system called the compass. It's set as the first. It's set as the first Sunday after the first full moon following the vernal equinox. So why is that? Because the church wanted to keep the holiday tied to the timing of the Passover, which is in fact. I'm going to get my tablet. No, not right now. Let me finish.
But I'm bored.
You can go in and watch it.
No, I'm going to watch it over here.
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
So the timing of the Passover.
Mom,
the Jewish festival during which the New Testament says this is an account of the resurrection. So the lesson here is the timing of the lunar and biblical are not a plot to cover up the solar festival. So, when you rely on debunking pagan histories, make your traditions look like they are built on. Don't make your traditions look like they're built on ignorance. In fact, you don't need to prove that everything is pagan to find value in the spring. The spring equinox of the Astora, for many, is a powerful time of a balance and awakening. It stands on its own. You don't need to win Easter to have a valid spiritual practice. By acknowledging that Easter in its own distinct, large secular is very distinct and largely secular Jewish and Christian in the Jewish and Christian history to account for this. So give yourself the space to build an authentic, historically grounded paganism that respects the truth. And that's something to say about it. And to wrap everything up, there's power in the aspect of finding and knowing and understanding and accepting how things naturally are and actually are throughout history and beyond. So with that said, this reaches the end of the Hebrew Light.
I'm back, Mama.
All right. Tune in, turn up, and very happy Easter to all of you. And Passover with all of that.
Bye.
Bye. No. All right. Y'all take care out there.
No.